but at times Mercedes and the management has also not been there, which again just doesn't help Lewis to go on to compete, to finish in the places that he wants to finish. But now, if we're talking about Lewis Hamilton's move to Ferrari, there are also questions that come up when you talk about that, because Lewis Hamilton is going into a team that right now is performing very well and has a chance at winning the World Championship. It's been a tough year for Lewis Hamilton. If we're being honest, it's been a tough year for Lewis Hamilton every year since the 2021 season. From the struggles at the beginning of the season, from the struggles of the last few races, to being out-qualified multiple times by George Russell, to his own inconsistent performances, and of course, to the W15 that has also not been a reliable car. There's so many things that we can pick apart when talking about Lewis Hamilton's 2024 season. What we've seen for the past 3 years or so just gets every single Formula One fan to ask themselves, is Lewis Hamilton the problem? Is it over for Lewis Hamilton? Is the Mercedes car really that bad? There are so many things to dissect, and in this video we're going to look at Lewis Hamilton's season, where he is right now, and what he can do next season to improve, and will he even in fact improve at Ferrari? Or will he even be good enough at Ferrari with the added pressure of driving for the greatest team in Formula One history, next to Charles Leclerc, one of the best drivers in Formula One? And you can even make the argument that if Charles Leclerc had the same car as Lando Norris, he would be leading the championship right now. Will all of these factors help Lewis Hamilton, or are they just going to hamper him going into next year? As much as we love to talk about Formula One and the individual drivers and how each driver performs and how obsessed we get with the Drivers' Championship, sometimes we tend to forget that Formula One at the end of the day is a team sport. And as such, in a team sport, players will always be judged by their teammates. Especially in a sport like Formula One, where the team designs both cars and drivers typically drive the same car with equal performance, you can easily tell which driver is better and which driver is doing worse. And if we're going to apply that same logic to this year and Lewis Hamilton, we have to compare him to George Russell. I don't think I'm saying anything new when I say that this year George Russell has outperformed Lewis Hamilton, especially when you look at their point difference this year and then you remember what happened in Belgium. The gap to George Russell could be a lot more. But points aside, you can also tell that Lewis Hamilton just doesn't have that same qualifying pace that he used to have back in his prime. This is more evident when you look at the qualifying pace, when you can just tell that Lewis Hamilton just doesn't have that same ability to just outperform everyone like he did back in his peak. Yes, at the time, Lewis Hamilton also had the best and the fastest car in the whole grid, but at the same time, the comparison to George Russell where they're competing in, you know, more or less equal machinery, you can of course make an argument and put an asterisk to that, but for the most part, as far as we know, they are driving in same machinery, and when you look at that, when you compare their performances, George Russell has definitely outperformed Lewis Hamilton. And to be fair to Lewis, the qualifying performance isn't that bad, but when you're talking about being one of the guys that should be competing for a world championship, when you're talking about a guy that's one championship away from having the most championships in Formula One history, who at the time of recording is tied with Michael Schumacher, Hamilton's qualifying pace this year has been lackluster, with George Russell averaging a grid position of roughly 6 compared to Lewis's 8. If Lewis wants to take that next step and win his 8th, which we all know he wants to, he's one of the biggest competitors in the world, one of the biggest competitors in sporting history. We know he wants to win that 8th, but if he wants to do that, he does need to start performing a lot better, because it's not good enough right now. But of course, that isn't the full story. It never is the full story in sports, especially in a sport like Formula One, where there are so many components, where there's the driver, there's the car, there's the mechanics, there's the engineers behind the scenes, there's the team principals. There are so many moving parts in Formula One that you can't just point to one thing. You can't just point the finger at Lewis Hamilton and blame him for everything that has happened so far this year. You also have to look at when you look at the machinery that Mercedes gave to Lewis Hamilton this year, it also has not been good enough, and that's why us Lewis Hamilton fans, at least, we can look at next year with a bit more hope, because the Ferrari car is doing a lot better. Over the last few races, the Ferrari car has even looked like it could possibly be the fastest car on the grid on its day. But for now, Lewis Hamilton is stuck with the W15, which right now moves like a truck. This year, Mercedes just have given us fans a massive headache and so many questions to ask ourselves and ask everyone involved with the team, because when you look back at the start of the season, when Lewis Hamilton was starting either 6th or 8th, it just wasn't good enough. But then with the upgrades during the middle of the season, Lewis Hamilton was able to win the British Grand Prix and of course the Belgian Grand Prix. So then you thought maybe, just maybe, Mercedes are going to be able to turn the table around and possibly again compete compete for those podiums. But again, if you look back at recent history, that has not been the case. I have criticized Lewis Hamilton's performances, I have criticized his consistency, but at the same time, you have to look at this car and you can't tell me that this car is good enough. But if we're going to talk about Lewis Hamilton's consistency, we also have to talk about Mercedes' consistency, because at times it just makes you wonder what is going on with the team. For example, in that race in Singapore, when Lewis Hamilton managed to get a great qualifying round and then they put Lewis Hamilton in soft tires when no one else was doing that. It's like, yes, you can blame the car, yes, you can blame Lewis Hamilton, but at times Mercedes and the management has also not been there, which again just doesn't help Lewis to go on to compete, to finish in the places that he wants to finish. And again, in this channel I talk about so many different things. I talk about the UFC, I talk about the Premier League, I talk about the Champions League, the NBA, I talk about the WNBA, I talk about so many sports, and I'm telling you right now, the most difficult analysis I've had to make for a video so far this year has been this one, this mess that is going on at the minute with Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. You just don't know who to point the finger at, you just don't know what is going on. You don't even know if Lewis Hamilton is really getting the same car as George Russell, because at times it just makes you wonder, how can they be racing in the same car? And going back to what I was talking about, the mid-season upgrades, again, Lewis Hamilton was up there, he was winning races, he was getting into podiums, but then all of a sudden the car just wasn't performing again. That is why in so many interviews you look at Lewis Hamilton and he's just done with this team, he's done with this season, and he wants to move forward. And again, when you look at the last few races, how could you blame Lewis? Not only are Mercedes performing at the worst they've been performing all season, but at the same time Ferrari are performing at the best that they have been performing all season. Whether we're talking about Lewis Hamilton himself, whether we're talking about Lewis Hamilton supporters, whether we're talking about just normal F1 fans, the truth is we are all excited for what's going to happen next season, because again, as I've said, they are going on a downwards trajectory, whereas Ferrari are performing very well and they seem to be going upwards. It's such an interesting dynamic. This also brings up the psychology of Lewis Hamilton and what he's going through at the minute. Of course, I don't know what he's going through, you don't know what he's going through, but we can make some assumptions. And one of the assumptions I have made is that Lewis Hamilton is done with this team because they have not given him a car good enough to perform, and at times this season they have really screwed him over. So why would Lewis even want to continue to drive this car? Again, as he said in previous interviews, he is done with this team. He doesn't want to race for them anymore. He wants to move over to Ferrari. Now, he's not said that explicitly, but we can read between the lines. And again, for a lot of us F1 fans, we are also tired of seeing Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes. The sport is at its best when the best drivers are driving the best cars. It just gives for more entertaining racing. For example, the 2021 season was so great, or even the 2012 and 2013 seasons were so great because there were so many competitive cars and competitive drivers going for it. But now, if we're talking about Lewis Hamilton's move to Ferrari, there are also questions that come up when you talk about that, because Lewis Hamilton is going into a team that right now is performing very well and has a chance at winning the World Championship. And when you talk about Hamilton's move to Ferrari, you also have to question whether he's going to be good enough at Ferrari, because Ferrari right now are in contention to win the Constructors' Championship. And is Lewis Hamilton coming into the team going to help the team or hamper the team? I personally believe that Lewis Hamilton is going to help the team. Again, one of the greatest drivers in Formula 1 history, if not the greatest, paired with Charles Leclerc, and paired with the way this car's been performing, and paired with the way this Ferrari team has been managing races recently, I only see this team going from strength to strength. However, you do have to ask these questions. And then of course, Charles Leclerc. I've said this before, but if you gave Charles Leclerc the same car that Lando Norris currently has, the gap to Max Verstappen would be a lot less. And even at times this season where the car wasn't good enough, or where the Ferrari team didn't make the best decisions, we still saw Charles Leclerc making the most out of every opportunity. Charles Leclerc is younger, he's not won anything yet, so he's hungrier than ever. And going to next season with Red Bull struggling and maybe Ferrari being able to catch up to McLaren, I could see Charles Leclerc also being a world champion. Charles Leclerc is one of those drivers outside of Max Verstappen, outside of Hamilton and Alonso, the drivers that are waiting to be the next world champions. I have Charles Leclerc at the top of that list, ahead of George Russell, ahead of Lando Norris, ahead of Oscar Piastri. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Lewis Hamilton compares to Charles Leclerc, because if we have compared how Lewis Hamilton has done against George Russell, the comparison to Charles Leclerc is even worse. Charles Leclerc has had 3 wins and 14 podium finishes, compared to Hamilton's 2 wins and 6 podium finishes. Now, a lot of that has also to do with the car. I'm not going to deny that, but at the same time, especially after the summer break, you cannot deny me the consistency of Charles Leclerc and how dangerous he can be next year when Ferrari are actually able to compete. And again, the chances for Ferrari to win a world championship are definitely there. I feel like they can definitely do it. However, we need to have in mind that next year, he's not going to be out there by himself. If he wants to win the Drivers' Championship, he has to beat Charles Leclerc. He has to beat Max Verstappen. He has to beat Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, and George Russell. Not to mention the other drivers. This brings us to the question, is it over for Lewis Hamilton? And personally, I don't think it's over for Lewis Hamilton. I still think that at worst, he still has 2 good years on him. And seeing Lewis Hamilton more motivated with a fresh start, with a chip on his shoulder, with a functional team, I still think Lewis Hamilton can definitely still be competing for the Drivers' Championship next year. And let's also not forget, this W15 car, as I've said before, is not a very good car. It's not a car that should be finishing in the top 3 places. It will be a lot different next year when Lewis Hamilton has a car that's actually able to compete and he has a team behind him that actually believe in him and want him to succeed. But anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you watching to the end. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, share, do all those things to please help me grow this channel. And as per usual, I'll see you soon.